The Pokémon trading card game came out in the late 1990s, and if you loved it from the jump, you're of an age that social time is now likely spent at a happy hour high top, over appetizers, or asking what you can bring for a Friendsgiving. And you need something to talk about, something that you know about, something that you know interesting things about, and that's why we're here. The foundational concepts of Pokémon are tied into the whims of Victorian women, their often sickly children, and the overstuffed men who got to do serious science. So Pokémon is the biggest franchise in the world, and not narrowly. As of January 2021, the franchise is credited with over $100 billion in sales. And Hello Kitty, the next on the list, is short by over $15 billion. We're going to focus on the Pokémon trading card game here. The first Pokémon thing was a pair of Game Boy role-playing games released February 27th, 1996 in Japan. Based on one of the creator's childhood obsessions with watching bugs, it was expanded into a Japanese trading card game in October of the same year. Around the same time, Magic the Gathering was patented by Wizards of the Coast in the United States. Magic had the virtual jetpack of a legitimately fun game, the added rocket fuel of collectability, and a golden ticket allure of high-value possibilities from weekly allowance scale investments. Magic the Gathering took the market by storm. And Pokémon was the next CCG. Within months, Pokémon was outselling everything, and the broad audience it found responded to traits built into the series that had been developed, codified, and championed by, yes, those Victorians. Central to the valuation of a collectible like this is the idea of ephemera. Mary Elise Hogg's The Life Cycle of Printed Ephemera gives us a framework. Ephemera is an unpublished, flimsy, or insubstantial printed paper artifact produced for a specific purpose and not intended to survive beyond that purpose. Modern collectibles markets have rewarded people for completely disregarding these intentions, instead filing comics, cards, movie posters, and event tickets into safe and protective archives. And the first to flout these guidelines? Victorian ladies and children. This tiny rebellion starts a list of Victorian cultural traits that we can thank the weird kismet of late 19th century fads and technology for. One of which very much was collecting. Victorian society generally valued collecting for fostering prudence, inviting industry and meticulousness, training in the care of objects, and teaching classification and arrangement skills. Collectible paper ephemera started showing up in the 17th and 18th centuries, but it was the introduction and popularization of both chromolithography and advertising that popularized concepts of branded, colorful, collectible takeaways that marketers and mothers leveraged to bribe kids into running errands. And merchants often got a set of chromolithography cards included with deliveries that they could distribute to kids in the most enticing way for their hyper-local market. In addition to coveting all of these bits, ladies of the Victorian middle class were also encouraged to make collections in albums, and the value of these collections was also seen and determined by these women and children. This audience prized complexity or lavishness, rarity, and had a strong taste for puns, slang, and odd things turned into people. These word gags are prominent in Pokémon. And now we can talk about what's actually on those cards. But transitioning the content from the portable game that had lots of graphical limitations to printed cards wasn't a direct line. Pokémon Company president and CEO Tsunekazu Ishihara said, "I was initially of the opinion that if a game's mechanics in a TCG were interesting, then that's all that mattered. If I were to take this to the extreme, I had the argumentative point of view that the illustrations on the cards themselves were unnecessary." An early Charmander card changed his mind, though, by showing personality and behavior, an aha moment where collectability's capitalism and artistic merit transitioned from two separate ideas into one shared powerhouse concept. This observation became an immediate obligation for the series. A couple of traits are 100% consistent, even across thousands of cards. One, the Pokémon shown are individuals, not a definitive documentation of an entire species. The idea that individuals within a species are different is crucial and allows for the divergent art styles and behavior that we see over time. 2, illustrations should show the charm of the Pokémon. And lastly, the idea that these illustrations can and should highlight a moment in the individual's day or life. It isn't an anatomy diagram or detailed identification manual. Illustrator after illustrator has mentioned that they wanted to present the Pokémon as if they are really existing, including flora, other critters, and behaviors that reinforce the essential nature of the creature. The card images have a clear inspiration, and we bring, you guessed it, Victorian women back into the discussion. The era's forming middle class needed obsessions, interests, and hobbies to match the priorities of intellectualism and consumerism that looser pocketbooks and the advent of middle-class steamship travel could provide. And here enters the concept of amateur intellectualism, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen-style explorers and cartographers, classicists fabricating/resurrecting the concept of the Olympics, world's fairs, inventors. While men quickly commandeered the, air quote, important sciences, women and children were left to their own interests and devices when it came to botany and similar low-danger observations of the natural world. And so, if you ask lots of people to think about illustrations of nature and the kind of layouts where you see a few plants at different stages of blooming, and layouts that show stages of development and fuller ecosystems to provide in-world context. Many would talk about John James Audubon and Charles Darwin and guys like that. But Audubon wasn't nearly the first or even terribly honest with his observations, and Darwin, by his own assertion, couldn't draw. Who we should be talking about are scientific artists like Maria Sabia Merian and Marianne North. Members of an amazing peer group, each are described as scientists first on their Google profiles, and their innovations in observation, documentation, and aesthetic revolutionized both the art and science of their obsessions. Marianne was the first to bring insects and their habitats into shared compositions, and the first to document a tarantula eating a hummingbird, which was initially mocked as impossible and is now confirmed as both true and very metal. And she died nearly 70 years before Darwin was even born, having already traveled to South America and generating work that dispelled commonly held beliefs that bugs sprung from the mud as fully formed adults. Marianne North was a Victorian woman who traveled the world alone and discovered plants that were new to the burgeoning botanical sciences. Her oil paintings showed flora in the context of their surroundings, and the records she kept documented location, habitat, and uses. Every last one of them are clear inspirations for the settings we see in so many Pokémon cards today. If we think about the world of Pokémon as a full natural universe, it makes total sense to illustrate it the way that these women were presenting our known environments. It also feels almost obvious to layer in some other systems that Victorians were creating to understand, define, and sort this incredible quantity of organisms that were being cataloged as new to them discoveries. Like, how would you build a deck if you didn't understand how different organisms, cards, Pokémon could work together? And this is where the Misters, who were granted access to serious science, add to the Pokémon tapestry. We'll start with Darwin and his Origin of the Species, published in 1859. While the word Darwinism is now commonly used to describe a collected set of scientific theories, the concept has gone through a lot of change since the original publication. But that's a different story. The narrow part of this broad theory that we're going to talk about is the idea that following generations of organisms are more likely to carry forward beneficial traits. Literally, the idea of Darwinian evolution is gameplay in Pokémon. It's weird, obviously, and not 100% one-to-one, but it's there. And now, while scientists, we're out in the world discovering all these variations and life stages of all these new and exciting Pokémon, we come to the problem of how to document their attributes and, even more game-specifically, how to make it usable on a playing card. For sure, Pokémon trading card game built on lessons of Magic the Gathering and Dungeons & Dragons and others to crack this nut, but those two games were aping the content hierarchy methodologies of our mega collectors, the Victorians. The trading card game concept offers a real pressure cooker of needs. The cards have to relay a lot of information about each creature with no assumption of external reference materials, and it needs to be super quick read. Botanists, obviously, tackled this before the 1990s trading card boom. The classification of plants in particular had been a work in progress since the time of the ancient Greeks, but most systems really crumbled when applied outside of the developer's immediate set of examples. It's just too big once you go out into a different ecosystem. But having a disparate society of enthusiastic intellectuals without a way to collaborate led to everyone making their own system. some without consistency or rigor, and none matching. To their credit, it seems like every big brain time era has been blessed with a project manager librarian who wanted to standardize this stuff and make it usable for as large a group of people as possible. So they did. Concepts of evolutionary traits got layered into a naming system that provided information on the relationships between organisms, and chunks of information got grouped together with ample indenting and white space to make it easy to find the section that you're looking for. And the teams working on trading card games needed to figure some stuff out too. The lessons about consistency, information hierarchy, and readability certainly were shareable. My nerd heart soars with all of the extra information and ties discovered during the research for this piece. It's nowhere near complete, but you also really shouldn't hold a lecture over appetizers. So these examples were chosen because they have core general knowledge ideas and easy ties to a Pokémon concept that doesn't require you to play the game. It's very accommodating. And good luck out there. Order the cheese sticks. They're always good.